We think we know the Middle Ages. We picture mud, plagues, and very bad teeth. We see a dark, ignorant time between the glories of Rome and the brilliance of the Renaissance. And sure, a lot of it was tough. Life was often short. You wouldn't want to get a toothache in 1350, but what if we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater? What if, in our rush for progress, we've forgotten some simple, powerful habits that made life more human? Some historians argue the average medieval peasant worked fewer hours in a year than we do now. They had more holidays. They spent more time with their community. They knew where their food came from because they often grew it themselves. They slept differently. Their bodies were stronger. Their minds were trained to remember incredible amounts of information. Are our lives really better now, with our endless notifications, our processed food, our social isolation, and our chronic sleep debt? Is it possible that a peasant from the 14th century could teach us something about living well? What if their forgotten habits are not relics of a primitive past, but solutions to our very modern problems? Let's look at what we've lost. Number 22. What if we shared more than just Wi-Fi passwords? We are obsessed with ownership. My house, my yard, my car, my stuff. We put up fences to mark our little patch of the world. It feels safe and modern. But for most of the Middle Ages, one of the most vital resources was not owned by anyone. It was shared. It was called the commons. The village commons was an area of land that belonged to the community. It wasn't a free-for-all. It was a carefully managed resource governed by ancient rights and local customs. You might have the right of pasture to graze your cow or a few sheep. You could have the right of pannage to let your pigs forage for acorns in the forest, or the right of estovers to gather firewood. This system was the backbone of the peasant economy for centuries. It provided a safety net. Even if you had very little private land, the commons ensured your family wouldn't starve. We're often taught this idea failed. In 1968, an ecologist named Garrett Hardin wrote a famous essay called The Tragedy of the Commons. He argued that any shared resource is doomed to be overexploited. Each person, acting in their own self-interest, will take as much as they can until the resource is destroyed. His idea became gospel. It was used to justify privatizing everything from land to water. But Hardin was wrong, or at least he was describing a situation with no community and no rules. He wasn't describing a real medieval commons. In 2009, a political scientist named Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in Economics for proving him wrong. She spent her career studying how real communities around the world successfully manage common resources. She found that when people have shared traditions, clear rules, and the power to enforce them, they are brilliant at sustainable management. The medieval commons wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph of community cooperation. We've forgotten how to do this. We've replaced stewardship with ownership. The enclosure movement, which started in the late Middle Ages and accelerated over the next few centuries, fenced off the commons for private use. It created wealth for a few but displaced millions and destroyed a way of life. Today, we see the ghost of the commons in a public park or a library. But the idea of sharing productive resources feels alien. We have tool libraries, community gardens, and car sharing programs, but they are on the fringe. Our default setting is to buy our own. What if we brought back the commons? Not just for grazing sheep, but for modern needs. Imagine a neighborhood with a common workshop full of tools nobody uses more than twice a year. Imagine a community kitchen for large-scale preserving or celebrations. Imagine commonly owned solar farms or high-speed internet networks. It requires a shift in thinking from what is mine to what is ours. It means rebuilding trust and learning to govern ourselves again, just like those medieval villagers did. Did the enclosure of the commons also enclose our minds, trapping us in a cycle of individual consumption? What would a modern city look like if a quarter of its land was a true managed common space for urban farming, recreation, and community projects? Could the solution to resource scarcity be not more private ownership, but less? Number 21, should a bottle of water cost more in a desert? Today, the answer is obvious. Of course it does. That's supply and demand. The price of something is whatever people are willing to pay for it. If you're desperate, the price goes up. We call it surge pricing for a taxi in a rainstorm or dynamic pricing for a plane ticket at Christmas. We may not like it, but we accept it as how the world works. A medieval peasant would have called it a sin. In the Middle Ages, they had a concept called the just price or justum pretium. This idea, most famously developed by the theologian Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, wasn't based on market forces. It was based on ethics. The just price of a good should cover the cost of the materials and the labor that went into making it. It should be enough for the craftsman or merchant to support their family in a way appropriate to their station in life. That's it. To charge more than that was considered dishonest. To dramatically raise the price of grain during a famine, for example, was a grave moral failing. Taking advantage of someone's desperation was a form of usury. The goal of economic exchange wasn't to maximize profit. It was to maintain social order and fairness. The economy was seen as a part of the community, not a separate force that governed it. Guilds often set prices for goods to ensure quality and prevent both price gouging and cutthroat competition that would drive artisans out of business. This way of thinking seems completely alien to our modern capitalism. The idea that a CEO has a moral obligation to cap their profits to keep prices fair for customers sounds absurd to many. The entire logic of the stock market is to maximize shareholder value, not to deliver a justified price. We have separated our economic life from our ethical life. A good deal is about the lowest price for the buyer and the highest profit for the seller. We rarely ask if that deal was fair to the person who made the product or the community it was sold in. But we see the hunger for this old idea everywhere. The fair trade movement is a modern attempt to create a just price for coffee or chocolate, ensuring producers in developing countries get a fair wage for their labor. People get angry when they see pharmaceutical companies raise the price of life-saving medicine by 5,000%. They are angry at ticket scalpers who buy up all the seats and resell them at astronomical prices. This anger is a faint echo of the medieval belief that the economy should serve people, not the other way around. Bringing this habit back doesn't mean abandoning markets. It means re-infusing them with a sense of morality. It means asking questions beyond, what's the price? We could ask, was the person who made this paid a living wage? Is this price exploiting a temporary shortage? Is this company's profit margin reasonable, or is it extractive? It's about choosing to be a citizen before you are a consumer. Have we completely separated our economic decisions from our moral compass? What would happen to global markets if just price replaced market price as the guiding principle? Is a system based purely on what the market will bear inherently unstable and profoundly unjust? Number 20. Why did we trade 100 holy days for a 2-day weekend? We are exhausted. We live in a culture of burnout. The 5-day work week, a product of the 20th century, feels relentless. Our holidays are few and far between, and the 2-day weekend is often just a frantic scramble to do laundry, buy groceries, and prepare for the next 5 days of work. We think of our medieval ancestors as toiling endlessly from dawn till dusk. We are wrong. The medieval calendar was full of holes. It was punctuated by an astonishing number of holidays. Besides Sundays, there were dozens of saints' days, feast days, and festivals scattered throughout the year. The historian Juliet Schor, in her book The Overworked American, estimates that a 13th century English peasant had around 150 days off a year. That's nearly a third of the year. The modern American worker, with their legally mandated 0 vacation days and 10 federal holidays, gets a fraction of that. These weren't just days off in our sense, they were communal celebrations. They marked the rhythm of the year and the seasons. There was Candlemas in February, marking the return of the light. May Day celebrated the arrival of spring. Lammas in August was the festival of the first harvest. There were feasts for local saints, guild patrons, and major Christian events like Christmas, Easter, and Whitsun. These were days of mandatory rest, feasting, games, and religious observance. They were the glue that held the community together. Work itself was different. It was task-oriented, not time-oriented. You worked until the job was done, not until the clock struck 5. In summer, during planting or harvest, the days were long and hard. But in the winter, or on the many festival days, the pace of life slowed dramatically. Our modern concept of a rigid 40-hour week, every week, all year, would have seemed like a bizarre and cruel form of servitude to them. We traded this cyclical, varied rhythm of life for the linear, monotonous grind of industrial capitalism. We gained efficiency and productivity. We lost the connection to the seasons, to our communities, and to a natural pace of work and rest. Our holidays have become commercialized interruptions rather than meaningful communal events, where Christmas is about shopping, Easter is about candy, the 4th of July is about mattress sales. What if we revived the idea of a calendar full of smaller, more frequent celebrations? What if companies offered Founders Day or local Community Day holidays? What if we celebrated the solstice, the equinox, or the first harvest with a day of rest and a neighborhood potluck? It's about reintroducing a different kind of time, not the endless uniform time of the clock, but the cyclical, meaningful time of the calendar. It's about creating shared moments of joy and rest that are not tied to consumption. By flattening our calendar into a repeating work-rest cycle, have we lost our connection to the deep rhythms of nature and community? What would a modern company look like if it gave its employees a dozen small, irregular festival days off instead of a rigid 2-week vacation block? Did the sheer number of medieval holidays act as a form of societal mental health care that we've since abandoned? Number 19, could you live without a to-do list? How much do you need to write down just to get through the day? Your shopping list, your work tasks, your appointments, your passwords, that phone number someone gave you. We have outsourced our memory to our phones and our notebooks. We are terrified of forgetting. For most people in the Middle Ages, this reliance on writing would seem like a strange weakness. Their minds were their primary storage devices. Literacy was not widespread. Still, books, written by hand on expensive parchment, were rare and precious objects. So people had to remember. A merchant had to remember his accounts and debts. A priest had to remember vast sections of scripture and liturgy. A storyteller, or bard, had to hold entire epic poems in their head. The average person had to remember property boundaries, family lineages, local laws, and agricultural knowledge without a user manual. Their brains were trained for recall in a way ours are not. They had sophisticated techniques for this. These were the arts of memory, inherited from classical antiquity. One of the most famous was the memory palace, or the method of loci. To remember a list of items or a speech, you would imagine a familiar building, like your home or the local church. Then, you would mentally walk through the building in a specific order, placing an image representing each thing you needed to remember in a specific location or locus. To recall the information, you just had to take another mental stroll through your palace. The more bizarre and vivid the image, the better you'd remember it. Thomas Aquinas was a master of this, reportedly using it to compose and memorize his monumental Summa Theologica. We've let this mental muscle atrophy. The invention of the printing press by Gutenberg around 1440 was the beginning of the end for this deep reliance on memory. As books became cheaper and more common, the need to store information internally decreased. Today, with the internet in our pockets, we rarely commit anything substantial to memory. Why bother memorizing a poem when you can Google it? Why remember a friend's phone number when it's in your contacts? Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, explores how the internet is changing the very structure of our brains, making us better at scanning for information, but worse at deep concentration and memorization. Learning this habit isn't about throwing away our smartphones. It's about reclaiming a piece of our cognitive ability. Try memorizing a short poem each week. Try going to the grocery store for 5 items without a list. Try learning your partner's phone number by heart. It feels strange at first, like exercising a long dormant muscle. But it builds focus and attention. The process of creating a memory palace for a presentation or a set of facts forces you to engage with the information on a much deeper level than just reading it off a slide. It connects you to a powerful human ability that we are in danger of forgetting completely. Is our reliance on external memory aids making our internal minds weaker and less agile? What new forms of creativity and understanding could we unlock if we trained our memories as rigorously as our medieval ancestors did? If we lost access to the internet tomorrow, how much of our culture's essential knowledge would vanish because it only exists on servers and not in our heads? Number 18 is drinking water all day. Really a good idea? We are obsessed with hydration. We carry water bottles everywhere. We're told to drink 8 glasses a day. In the modern office, a bottle of water is as common as a keyboard. If you told a medieval person you drank water all day, they would probably think you were either very poor or very foolish. For much of the Middle Ages, water was often a risky beverage. Rivers and wells near towns and cities could be contaminated with human and animal waste. Diseases like cholera and typhoid were a constant threat. While people in the countryside with clean wells or springs drank water, for many, the safest and most common daily drink was not water, but beer. Or, more accurately, small beer. This wasn't the strong stuff you'd find in a pub today. Small beer was a low alcohol brew, probably between 1% and 2.5% ABV. It was a staple of the diet for everyone, including children. The brewing process boiling the water killed off dangerous pathogens, making it a much safer option than water from the local river. It was also nutritious, full of B vitamins and carbohydrates from the grain. It was a source of calories for a hard-working population. A medieval laborer might drink up to a gallon of it a day. It was their Gatorade. This habit of drinking a fermented low-alcohol beverage as a primary source of fluids persisted for centuries. It wasn't about getting drunk. It was about safety, nutrition, and hydration. Wine served a similar purpose in other regions. The reliance on plain water as our default drink is a relatively recent phenomenon made possible by modern sanitation and water treatment systems that only became widespread in the 19th and 20th centuries. We've traded the benefits of fermented drinks for the purity of sterile water. While clean water is a triumph of public health, we may have lost something. The obsession with pure H2O overlooks the potential benefits of other forms of hydration. Modern science is beginning to rediscover the importance of fermented foods and drinks for gut health. Drinks, like kombucha or kefir, are, in a way, a modern rediscovery of what our ancestors knew instinctively, that fermentation can make things both safer and more nutritious. Revisiting this habit doesn't mean we should start drinking beer instead of water, but it might mean questioning our dogmatic belief in pure water as the only healthy choice. It can mean incorporating more fermented drinks into our diet. It's also a reminder that our current healthy habits are not timeless truths, but products of our specific historical moment. What we consider normal, like carrying a plastic bottle of filtered water everywhere, would have seemed incredibly strange and wasteful to someone from the past. Their normal was a system that provided calories and safety in every sip. By sterilizing our drinks, have we also sterilized our gut microbiome, contributing to modern digestive ailments? What other forgotten nutritional benefits did low-alcohol, fermented grain beverages provide that we are no longer getting? If our modern water systems failed, how long would it take for us to remember that boiling water and fermenting it is one of the oldest survival technologies in human history? Number 17 are our houses making us sick and weak. We live in a world of perfect comfort. When it's cold outside, we turn up the thermostat. When it's hot, we turn on the air conditioning. We exist in a state of thermal monotony, a narrow band of temperature that we never leave. Our homes, cars, and offices are all kept at a steady 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 Celsius. This constant comfort feels like a peak of civilization, but it might be making us weak. A medieval peasant lived in a world of radical temperature variation. Their small, often one-room houses were leaky and drafty. The only source of heat was an open fire in the center of the room. It was smoky, inefficient, and could never heat the whole space evenly. In winter, they were cold. They wore layers of wool and huddled near the fire. They slept under heavy blankets, often together with family for warmth. In summer, there was no air conditioning. They sought shade, slowed their pace, and sweated. Their bodies were constantly adapting to the real temperature of the world around them. This constant exposure to cold and heat acted as a form of training for the body. Modern science is starting to understand the benefits we've lost. Cold exposure, for example, is being studied for a wide range of health benefits. It can stimulate the production of brown fat, a type of fat that burns calories to generate heat, which may help with weight management. It can reduce inflammation, improve circulation, and boost the immune system. The Dutch Iceman, Wim Hof, has brought these ideas into the mainstream, teaching people to use cold showers and breathing techniques to improve their health and resilience. He's essentially repackaging an ancient human experience that we have engineered out of our lives. Our addiction to comfort has made our bodies less resilient. We've lost the ability to thermoregulate effectively. We shiver at the slightest draft. We feel lethargic in the summer heat. Our vascular system doesn't get the workout that comes from constricting in the cold and dilating in the heat. A 2015 study from University College London found that there has been a global convergence in indoor temperatures. meaning we are creating a single, artificial climate all over the world, disconnecting us from our local environments. Reclaiming this habit doesn't mean we have to freeze in drafty huts. It can be simple. Turn down the thermostat a few degrees in the winter. Sleep with fewer blankets. End your shower with a 30-second blast of cold water. Sit outside on a hot day without immediately retreating to air conditioning. It's about intentionally reintroducing small, manageable doses of thermal stress into our lives. It's about reminding our bodies of their ancient, powerful ability to adapt. By eliminating all thermal discomfort, have we inadvertently weakened our immune systems and metabolic health? What is the long-term biological cost of living in a perpetually stable, artificial climate? Are chronic diseases like obesity and inflammation partly a result of our bodies forgetting how to deal with the simple, ancient stress of being too hot or too cold? Number 16, who do you build things with? Think about your job. You might work with a team, but are you part of a real community of practice? A group of people dedicated to the same craft, sharing knowledge, setting standards, and supporting each other through life. For many of us, the answer is no. Our professional lives are often transient and individualistic. In the Middle Ages, the ideal was the guild. Guilds were associations of artisans or merchants who controlled the practice of their craft in a particular town. The stonemasons' guild, the weavers' guild, the blacksmiths' guild, these were the heart of the medieval urban economy. To practice a trade, you had to belong to the guild. It was a closed shop. But it was so much more than a union or a professional association. The guild was a complete social and economic system. It controlled quality. A guild would inspect goods to make sure they met a certain standard, protecting both the consumer and the reputation of the craft. A controlled training, a young person would start as an apprentice, living with a master craftsman for years to learn the trade. After becoming a journeyman and traveling to learn from other masters, they could eventually submit a masterpiece to the guild to be judged worthy of becoming a master themselves. This system, detailed by historians like Stephen A. Epstein, ensured a slow, deep transmission of skill from one generation to the next. The guild was also a social safety net. It provided for members who fell on hard times and supported the widows and orphans of those who died. It organized feasts and religious processions. It was a fraternity, a source of identity, and a form of local government all in one. Your work was not just a job, it was who you were, and the guild was your community. We've lost this deep integration of work, learning, and community. The Industrial Revolution, with its factories and wage labor, broke the guild system. Today we learn skills in schools, often divorced from practical application. We work for corporations where our primary loyalty is to a paycheck, not to a craft or a community of peers. Professional networking events are a pale, transactional shadow of the deep bonds of a guild. The idea of a slow, multi-year apprenticeship feels impossibly inefficient in our fast-paced world. But we see a longing for what the guilds offer. The open source software movement is a kind of digital guild with experienced programmers mentoring newcomers and collaborating to maintain standards for a shared craft. The rise of craft breweries, artisan bakeries, and small batch makers reflects a desire to return to a model of high-quality, skilled work. Online communities for writers, woodworkers, or coders try to replicate the knowledge sharing and support of the old guilds. Reviving the spirit of the guild means finding your community of practice and investing in it. It means mentoring someone junior to you. It means prioritizing mastery of a skill over just climbing a career ladder. It means seeing your colleagues not just as competitors or temporary teammates, but as fellow craftsmen engaged in a shared enterprise. It's about building something that lasts longer than a single project or a single career. In our fragmented individualistic careers, have we lost the sense of shared purpose and identity that gave medieval work its meaning? What would a modern education system look like if it were based on long-term apprenticeships instead of classroom lectures? Could we create new kinds of digital or local guilds to preserve quality and community in our modern professions? Number 15, have you ever walked for 1,000 miles? We take vacations to relax, we fly to a beach to lie down, or to a city to see the sights. Our travel is about consumption and comfort. It's often a brief escape from our real lives. In the Middle Ages, they had a different kind of travel. It wasn't a vacation. It was a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage was a long, intentional journey to a holy site. People would walk for weeks or months, often covering hundreds of miles. They went to Jerusalem, to Rome, or most famously to the shrine of St. James at Santiago de Compostela in Spain. This was not a comfortable experience. It was dangerous, difficult, and physically demanding. So why did they do it? They did it for many reasons: as an act of penance for sins, to seek a cure for an illness, to give thanks for good fortune, or simply as an expression of faith. But the journey itself was as important as the destination. A pilgrimage stripped you of your daily identity. On the road, a nobleman and a peasant were both just pilgrims. It was a great social leveler. You relied on the kindness of strangers for food and shelter at monasteries and hospices along the way. You walked with your thoughts, your prayers, and the rhythm of your own 2 feet. This kind of slow, difficult, transformative travel is almost completely alien to us. We measure journeys in hours, not months. We seek to eliminate difficulty, not embrace it. The modern revival of the Camino de Santiago shows that there is a deep hunger for this forgotten habit. Hundreds of thousands of people now walk the ancient routes each year. Many are not religious, but they are seeking something, a break from their normal lives, a physical challenge, a mental reset. They are seeking transformation, as documented in countless memoirs and studies of modern pilgrims. The act of walking day after day changes you. It simplifies your life to the bare essentials: walking, eating, sleeping. It forces you to be present in your body and in the landscape. It breaks down your ego. It connects you to a chain of humanity stretching back 1,000 years. It's the opposite of a package tour. It's an internal journey made manifest in the external world. We don't need to walk to Spain to reclaim this habit. We can make our own modern pilgrimages. It could be a multi-day hike along a national trail. It could be a long-distance bike ride to a place that has meaning for you. It could even be a project to walk every street in your own city. The key elements are intention, physical effort, and simplicity. It's about choosing a destination and deciding to get there under your own power, embracing the challenges along the way. It's about making the journey, not just the arrival, the point of the trip. Has our obsession with fast, comfortable travel robbed us of the possibility for profound personal change? What happens to our sense of place and distance when we can cross a continent in a few hours without ever touching the ground? Could the modern epidemics of anxiety and disconnection be treated with a simple, ancient prescription: a very, very long walk? Number 14, are you swallowing your food whole? Think about your last meal. Did you really taste it? Or did you eat it quickly while looking at your phone, watching TV, or working at your desk? For many of us, eating is just refueling. It's a task to be completed as efficiently as possible. We value speed and convenience. In the Middle Ages, particularly in monastic communities, they practiced a habit that was the complete opposite mindful eating. This practice was formalized in the Rule of St. Benedict, written around the year 530. This text, which governed life in thousands of monasteries for centuries, laid out a detailed guide for communal living. It included specific instructions for meals. Monks were to eat their meals in silence. While they ate, one of them would be assigned to read aloud from a sacred text. This practice was called table reading. The purpose of this was twofold. First, the silence and the reading elevated the act of eating from a purely physical process to a spiritual one. It was a time for nourishment of both the body and the soul. Second, it forced a slow, deliberate, and mindful approach to food. Without conversation to distract them, the monks were more present with their meal. They were encouraged to chew their food thoroughly, a practice known as Fletcherism in the 19th century, but which had its roots in these ancient traditions. The physician Horace Fletcher argued that chewing each bite of food until it was liquid had incredible health benefits. We have completely lost this habit. Our mealtimes are noisy and distracted. Family dinners, when they happen at all, are often accompanied by the television. Lunch is a sandwich eaten in 5 minutes at a desk. This way of eating is not good for us. Studies have shown that when we eat while distracted, we tend to eat more and feel less satisfied. Our digestion suffers because we don't chew our food properly, and our brains don't fully register that we've eaten, leading to later cravings. Reviving this medieval monastic habit doesn't require a vow of silence or a reading from scripture. It simply requires a commitment to pay attention. Try eating one meal a day without any distractions. No phone, no TV, no book, no laptop, just you and your food. Put your fork down between bites. Chew your food slowly. Notice the textures, the flavors, the smells. Think about where the food came from: the farm, the plant, the animal. This simple change can be transformative. It can improve digestion, help with weight management, and reduce stress. It turns a mundane daily task into a moment of peace and gratitude. It reconnects us to our food and our bodies. It is a form of meditation available to everyone several times a day. The monks of the Middle Ages understood that how you eat is as important as what you eat. By constantly eating in a state of distraction, are we suffering from a form of spiritual and physical indigestion? What is the cumulative effect on our bodies and minds of never giving the simple act of eating our full attention? Could the solution to many of our modern food issues be found not in a new diet, but in a 1,500-year-old rule for how to behave at the dinner table? Number 13, do you know how to use your weeds? We walk past them every day: dandelions in the lawn, nettles in the ditch, plantain in the cracks of the sidewalk. To us, they are weeds. We pull them, spray them, and curse them. To a person in the Middle Ages, they were not weeds. They were medicine, food, and useful materials. They had an intimate, practical knowledge of the plants that grew around them, a skill we have almost completely lost. This was the world of the herbal. For centuries, medical knowledge was plant knowledge. Every village would have a wise woman or healer who knew the local plants. Monasteries carefully cultivated extensive herb gardens, as their infirmaries were the main hospitals of the age. Great illustrated books, known as herbals, were copied by hand, detailing the properties of hundreds of plants. One of the most famous medieval herbalists was the 12th century German abbess, Hildegard of Bingen. She wrote extensively on the healing properties of plants, stones, and animals in her work Physica. For her, the natural world was a pharmacy provided by God. This knowledge was essential for survival. There were no drugstores. If you had a fever, you might be given a tea made from willow bark. We now know it contains salicin, the active ingredient in aspirin. A wound might be packed with yarrow to stop the bleeding and prevent infection. A cough might be treated with a syrup made from horehound or coltsfoot. A poultice of plantain leaves could soothe an insect bite. Dandelion greens were a nutritious food in the spring, and the roots could be used as a digestive aid. Stinging nettles, when cooked, are a superfood rich in iron and vitamins. We have replaced this deep local knowledge with a centralized industrial medical system. While modern medicine is a miracle, our ignorance of the natural world has made us less resilient. We no longer see the utility in the plants growing in our own backyards. We rely completely on a complex supply chain for our health and well-being. Ethnobotanists who study the remaining traditional cultures of the world are in a race against time to document this plant knowledge before it disappears forever. A 2016 report from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, warned that 1 in 5 of the world's plant species is at risk of extinction, and with them, their potential medicinal uses. Reclaiming this habit is not about rejecting modern medicine. It's about relearning to see the world around us. It's about identifying a few common useful plants in your local area. Learn to identify dandelion, plantain, and chickweed. Maybe you'll add them to a salad. Learn to recognize yarrow or mullein. You might never use them to treat a wound or a cough, but the act of learning to see and name them changes your relationship with your environment. It transforms a generic green background into a landscape of individual useful beings. It is a powerful act of re-enchanting the world. What other potent medicines and nutritious foods are we ignoring because we've labeled them as weeds? In our reliance on a global pharmaceutical industry, have we lost a fundamental form of self-sufficiency and resilience? If our supply chains were to break, how many of us would know how to find an aspirin or an antiseptic in the wild? Number 12. Why are we so afraid of the dark? Our world is never dark. From the moment the sun sets, we push back the night with a flood of artificial light. Our cities glow, visible from space. Our homes are full of bright screens and powerful bulbs. We can work, shop, and socialize 24 hours a day. We have conquered the night, and we are proud of it. But what if the darkness we've banished was something we desperately need? Life in the Middle Ages was governed by the sun. When it went down, the world became dark and dangerous. The primary sources of light were the fireplace, tallow candles, or expensive beeswax candles. They were dim, smoky, and used sparingly. For most people, activity largely ceased after sunset. The night was a time for sleep, storytelling, and quiet contemplation. It was a time of enforced rest and stillness. This experience of true, profound darkness is now almost unknown to us. The International Dark Sky Association estimates that 80% of the world's population lives under light-polluted skies. In much of Europe and North America, a third of the population can no longer see the Milky Way. This constant exposure to artificial light, especially the blue light from screens, is wreaking havoc on our biology. Our bodies are designed to respond to the natural cycle of light and dark. The hormone melatonin, which regulates sleep, is produced in darkness. Artificial light at night suppresses melatonin production, disrupting our sleep cycles and affecting our health. Roger Ekirch's book, At Day's Close Night in Times Past, masterfully documents how different pre-industrial life was. This night was not just an absence of day, it had its own character, its own sounds, and its own social life. It was a time when the imagination could roam free. We've filled the night with light and noise, and in doing so, we've lost its restorative power. We've lost the stars, which for millennia were a source of wonder, navigation, and myth. We've lost the deep, profound silence that can only be found in true darkness. We've lost the natural signal that tells our bodies and minds it's time to shut down, to rest, and to dream. Our epidemic of sleep disorders is a direct consequence of this loss. Reclaiming a little bit of the medieval night can have a huge impact on our well-being. It means practicing good sleep hygiene. Turn off bright overhead lights an hour or two before bed. Use dim, warm-colored lamps instead. Avoid screens, phones, tablets, TVs in the last hour before sleep. Make your bedroom as dark as possible using blackout curtains or an eye mask. And once in a while, get out of the city on a clear, moonless night. Go somewhere you can see the stars again. Let your eyes adapt and experience the awe that was a nightly reality for our ancestors. Is our 24/7 brightly lit society causing a slow-motion public health crisis by systematically disrupting our most fundamental biological rhythms? What have we lost culturally and spiritually by blotting out our view of the cosmos? Could the simple act of reintroducing true darkness into our lives be a powerful antidote to modern anxiety and sleeplessness? Number 11. Would you eat the whole animal? Go to a modern supermarket. The meat section is a display of neatly packaged, standardized cuts. In boneless, skinless chicken breasts, ground beef, pork chops, we have become profoundly disconnected from the animals we eat. We consume a few preferred muscle tissues and discard the rest. This would have been incomprehensibly wasteful to a medieval peasant. In the Middle Ages, when an animal was slaughtered, nothing was wasted. This was the practice of nose-to-tail eating. It wasn't a trendy culinary philosophy, it was a simple necessity. An animal, whether it was a pig, a cow, or a sheep, was a huge investment of resources. To waste any part of it was to waste food, money, and labor. The muscle meat was, of course, eaten. But so were the organs. Liver, kidneys, heart, and tongue were common fare. The fat was rendered down to be used for cooking or making candles. The bones were boiled for hours or even days to make a rich, nutritious broth full of collagen and minerals. This broth was the base for countless soups and stews, a cornerstone of the medieval diet. The skin could be turned into leather or cooked until crisp. Even the blood was used to make sausages like black pudding. The intestines were used as sausage casings. The head might be boiled to make a gelatinous dish known as head cheese. This approach was not only less wasteful, it was also far more nutritious. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, packed with vitamins like A, D, E, K, and B12, as well as minerals like iron and zinc. Bone broth is rich in gelatin and amino acids that are good for joint, skin, and gut health. By eating only a few select muscle meats, our modern diet misses out on this incredible nutritional diversity. The celebrity chef Fergus Henderson is credited with reviving this philosophy with his London restaurant, St. John, and his book, The Whole Beast Nose to Tail Eating, but he was simply repopularizing ancient wisdom. Our squeamishness about offal and other unusual parts of the animal is a modern luxury. It stems from our alienation from the process of raising and butchering animals. We prefer our meat to be an abstract product, with no reminder of the living creature it came from. Reviving this habit means being more adventurous in our eating. It means trying liver or heart. It means learning to make a real bone broth from leftover chicken carcasses or beef bones instead of buying it in a carton. It's a more ethical and sustainable way to eat meat. If we are going to take an animal's life for food, We have a moral obligation to use all of it. It honors the animal and reduces waste. It also connects us to a long tradition of culinary wisdom, reminding us that for most of human history, survival depended on using every last scrap. By sanitizing our meat consumption into a few choice cuts, have we developed a nutritionally incomplete and ethically questionable diet? What other traditional foods have we abandoned out of modern squeamishness, to the detriment of our health? Could a return to nose to tail eating be a powerful solution for both improving public health and creating a more sustainable food system? Number 10, how did they survive winter without supermarkets? We take for granted that we can eat a fresh tomato in January. Our supermarkets are stocked year-round with produce flown in from all over the world. Our ancestors would have viewed this as a form of magic. For them, eating was dictated by the seasons, and a huge part of their year was dedicated to preparing for the hungry gap, the late winter, and early spring when fresh food was scarce. Their survival depended on the forgotten art of food preservation. Without refrigeration or modern canning, medieval people used a variety of ingenious techniques to make the bounty of the harvest last through the lean months. One of the most important was fermentation. Cabbage was salted and packed into crocks to make sauerkraut. Cucumbers became pickles, milk was turned into cheese and yogurt. These fermented foods were not only preserved, they were transformed. The process of fermentation creates beneficial bacteria probiotics that are vital for gut health. It also increases the bioavailability of certain vitamins. Drying was another key method. Fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, and herbs were laid out in the sun or hung near the fire. The fish and meat were also dried, creating a lightweight, long-lasting source of protein. Salting and smoking were used primarily for meat and fish. Salt was a precious commodity, a key element in global trade. It draws moisture out of the meat, preventing the growth of bacteria. Smoking not only preserved the meat, but also added flavor. Hams, bacon, and smoked fish were staples of the winter diet. This seasonal rhythm of preserving the harvest created a diet that was constantly changing throughout the year. The summer was a time of fresh abundance. The autumn was a frenzy of preserving. The winter was a time of eating from the pickles, the dried meats, the root vegetables stored in the cellar. As Sandor Katz details in his book, The Art of Fermentation, these traditions were a universal part of human culture until very recently. We have traded these skills for convenience. We rely on an industrial food system that gives us perpetual summer, but at a cost. We've lost the nutritional benefits of fermented foods. We've lost the resilience that comes from having a well-stocked pantry. We've lost the connection to the seasons that comes from eating what is locally available. The modern interest in home canning, fermenting, and dehydrating is a rebellion against this dependency. It's a way to reclaim control over our food and reconnect with these ancient, essential survival skills. You can start small. Make a batch of sauerkraut. Dry some herbs from your garden. Learn to make your own yogurt. These are not just hobbies, they are acts of empowerment. They reduce food waste, improve your health, and give you a taste of what food was like before it came in plastic wrap from thousands of miles away. In our quest for year-round convenience, have we created a food system that is incredibly fragile and a diet that is lacking in key nutrients? What deep, symbiotic relationship between humans and microbes did we sever when we stopped fermenting our own foods? If the grocery store shelves were empty for a week, how many of us would know how to feed ourselves? Number 9, do you make anything with your hands? Look around your home. How many of the objects you see did you make yourself? For most of us, the answer is very few, if any. We are consumers, not creators. We buy what we need. If something breaks, we often replace it instead of repairing it. In the Middle Ages, this would have been unthinkable. The world was built by hand. Most people were directly involved in making the things they used every day. A farmer might be a passable carpenter, able to fix a fence or a chair. A woman would spin wool into thread and then weave that thread into cloth for her family's clothes. She would also sew and mend those clothes until they fell apart. People made their own soap, their own candles, their own beer. Specialized crafts were the domain of the guilds, but a basic level of practical, hands-on skill was universal. The habit of making and mending was not a choice, it was a necessity. Things were too valuable to be thrown away. Materials were scarce, and labor was intensive. A new woolen tunic represented a huge investment of time, from shearing the sheep to the final stitch. You didn't just toss it out because it had a small hole. Mending was a constant, essential task. This mindset is captured in the old saying, "A stitch in time saves nine." It was a philosophy of stewardship and conservation born from scarcity. We live in the opposite world, a world of radical abundance and disposability. The era of fast fashion has given us clothes that are so cheap, it's often easier to buy a new shirt than to sew a button on an old one. We've lost the skills, home economics and shop class have largely disappeared from schools. The ability to darn a sock, fix a leaky faucet, or sharpen a knife is no longer common knowledge. The writer and philosopher Matthew B. Crawford, in his book, Shop Class a Soulcraft, argues that this shift away from manual skill has impoverished us. It has made us less independent and less connected to the physical world. Working with your hands is a deeply human activity. There is a unique satisfaction that comes from creating a physical object or from successfully repairing something that was broken. It engages a different part of our brain than the abstract, screen-based work that many of us do. It builds problem-solving skills, patience, and a sense of agency. You are not just a passive consumer, you are an active participant in the material world. Reclaiming this habit is a powerful antidote to our throwaway culture. Learn to sew a button. Get a cheap toolkit and watch online videos to learn how to do basic home repairs. Try knitting, woodworking, or pottery. Take up gardening. The goal is not to become completely self-sufficient. The goal is to reconnect with the physical reality of the world and to rediscover the joy and pride of making and mending. Has our consumer culture, which promises freedom through endless choice, actually made us more helpless and less skilled? What cognitive and psychological benefits do we miss out on when we no longer use our hands to create and repair the objects in our lives? Is the growing maker movement a sign that we are finally starting to remember that we are not just brains and vats, but embodied creatures who need to interact with the material world? Number 8, why did we stop eating together? The most important moments in our lives are often marked by a shared meal, a holiday dinner, a wedding feast, a birthday cake. Yet, on a daily basis, many of us eat alone. We eat at our desks, in our cars, or in front of the TV. The communal meal, once the bedrock of family and community life, is becoming an endangered species. Before, our medieval ancestors, eating alone would have been a sign of profound social isolation or eccentricity. In the Middle Ages, eating was almost always a social event. For a peasant family, the main meal of the day would be eaten together. In a great lord's castle, the entire household, from the lord and his family down to the lowest servant, would gather in the great hall to eat. The seating arrangements were strictly hierarchical, but everyone was present. As monasteries, as we've seen, ate together in the refectory. Guilds held regular feasts for their members. The communal meal was about more than just food. It was the primary forum for sharing news, telling stories, and reinforcing social bonds. It was where children learned the rules of their society. It was where community decisions were made and disputes were settled. The word companion comes from the Latin roots com with and panis bread. A companion is someone you share bread with. The act of eating together literally creates companionship. We have allowed the pace and structure of modern life to dismantle this vital institution. Your busy work schedules, long commutes, and the allure of digital entertainment have made the family dinner a challenge to organize. In a 2013 study, found that the average American family shares a meal together only a few times a week. The rise of processed, individualized convenience foods has made it easier than ever for everyone in a household to eat something different at a different time. The consequences of this shift are significant. Research has consistently shown that children who regularly eat dinner with their families have better academic performance, higher self-esteem, and lower rates of substance abuse and depression. For adults, sharing meals is linked to greater social connection and happiness. The act of sitting down together, sharing food, and talking without distraction is one of the most powerful technologies for building strong relationships we have ever invented. Reviving this habit is simple, but not always easy. It requires making a conscious commitment. It might mean setting a rule that the family eats together 3 nights a week, with no screens at the table. It could mean organizing a weekly potluck with neighbors or friends. It could be as simple as making sure you take a proper lunch break with your colleagues instead of eating at your desk. The goal is to reclaim meal times as a protected social space, not just a biological necessity. Have we, in our pursuit of individual freedom and efficiency, forgotten the simple biological truth that humans are a social species that needs to share food? What is the long-term societal cost of raising a generation of children who rarely experience a traditional family meal? Could the simple, daily ritual of eating together be a more powerful intervention for our epidemic of loneliness than any government program or new technology? Number 7. Does your body know what season it is? Our lives are strangely seasonless. We eat the same food year-round. We live in climate-controlled buildings. We work the same hours in December as we do in June. We have flattened the year into a uniform, unchanging experience. A person from the Middle Ages would be baffled by this. Their entire existence was shaped by the powerful, unavoidable rhythm of the seasons. The medieval year was a cycle of intense activity and enforced rest. Spring was for planting. Summer was for cultivating and growing, culminating in the hay harvest. Autumn was the time of the grain harvest, the most intense and crucial work period of the year. The entire community's survival depended on getting the crops in. But after the harvest and the autumn planting, as the days grew shorter and colder, came the winter. For an agricultural society, winter was a time of enforced slowdown. There was less to do in the fields. The days were short and the nights were long. It was a time for mending tools, weaving, and storytelling. It was also a time of relative scarcity of living off the preserved foods from the harvest. It was a time for the land and the people to rest and recover. This natural cycle of work and rest was not a choice, it was a physical reality. We have used technology to free ourselves from this cycle. Electric lights have conquered the winter darkness. A global trade has conquered seasonal eating. The modern knowledge worker's tasks are the same no matter the weather or the time of year. But have we paid a price for this freedom? Our bodies still have an ancient memory of the seasons. Many people suffer from seasonal affective disorder (SAD), a form of depression linked to the lack of light in winter. Our relentless, year-round pace of work leads to burnout. We have forgotten the wisdom of a fallow period. Reconnecting with this habit means consciously reintroducing seasonality into our lives. It starts with food. Try to eat more seasonally. Visit a farmer's market and see what's actually being harvested right now. Eat asparagus and rhubarb in the spring, tomatoes and zucchini in the summer, squash and apples in the autumn, and root vegetables and kale in the winter. This way of eating is not only better for the environment, it also attunes your body to the time of year. It also means adjusting our activity levels, embrace the energy of summer with more outdoor activities and social gatherings, and allow yourself to slow down in the winter. Don't fight the urge to be more introspective and quiet. Maybe this is the time of year to read more, to take on a quiet indoor hobby, or simply to get more sleep. It's about listening to the subtle cues of your own body and the world around you, rather than imposing the same rigid schedule on every day of the year. Did our ancestors possess a form of seasonal intelligence that we have lost? Is the modern epidemic of burnout a direct result of ignoring our biological need for a winter slowdown? What would our economy and our society look like if we structured our work year around the principles of the agricultural calendar, with periods of intense effort followed by periods of mandatory rest? Number 6, how much quiet do you have in your life? Our world is incredibly loud. We are surrounded by a constant barrage of noise traffic, construction, music in stores, notifications on our phones, the hum of appliances. Even our entertainment is loud. We have forgotten what true silence sounds like, and we may have forgotten how to be comfortable in it. For our medieval ancestors, silence was a much more common and valued part of life. Of course, the medieval world had its own noises, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of a market, the lowing of animals. But the baseline level of ambient noise was far, far lower than it is today. There were no engines, no electronics, no piped-in music. When you stepped out of a village and into the countryside, you would have been met with a profound quiet punctuated only by the sounds of nature. In certain parts of medieval society, silence was not just an absence of noise, it was a deliberate practice. In monasteries, silence was a core part of the spiritual discipline. The rule of St. Benedict states, "Let us do what the prophet says. I said, I will watch my ways, that I may not sin with my tongue. I have set a guard to my mouth. I was dumb and was humbled, and kept silence even from good things." Here the prophet shows that if we ought sometimes to refrain from good talk for the sake of silence, how much more ought we to abstain from evil words on account of the punishment due to sin? For monks, silence was a way to quiet the mind and listen for the voice of God. We have gone in the opposite direction. We often use noise to distract ourselves from our own thoughts. We put on a podcast to do the dishes, music to go for a run, the TV for background noise in the evening. As the French philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote in the 17th century, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This observation feels more true now than ever. The science is clear, constant noise is bad for us. It raises stress levels, increases blood pressure, and impairs cognitive function. The World Health Organization has identified noise pollution as a serious threat to public health. Conversely, studies have shown that silence can be restorative. It can lower stress, improve focus, and even stimulate brain growth. A 2013 study on mice found that 2 hours of silence per day led to the development of new cells in the hippocampus, a brain region linked to memory and learning. Reclaiming this forgotten habit is about intentionally creating pockets of silence in our noisy lives. It could be a 10-minute daily meditation practice. It could be a digital sunset where all electronic devices are turned off an hour before bed. It could be taking a walk in a park without headphones. It is about learning to be alone with your own thoughts without immediately reaching for a distraction. It can be uncomfortable at first, but in that silence we can find clarity, creativity, and a deep sense of peace that is impossible to find in the noise. Is our addiction to constant auditory stimulation a form of anxiety, a way to avoid confronting ourselves? What brilliant ideas and profound insights are we drowning out with our endless background noise? If a medieval monk were transported to a modern city, would he perceive our environment not as advanced, but as a form of sensory torture? Number 5, are your friends just like you? Look at your social circle. How diverse is it in terms of age? For many of us, our friends are roughly our own age. We went to school with them, or we work with them. We have segmented our society by generation. Young people hang out with other young people, middle-aged people with the middle-aged, and the elderly are often isolated in retirement communities. This is a very recent and very strange way for humans to live. In the Middle Ages, daily life was naturally intergenerational. In a peasant household, multiple generations often lived under one roof. Children, parents, and grandparents shared the same living space, the same work, and the same meals. A child's primary caregivers and teachers were not just their parents, but their entire extended family and village community. They learned stories from their grandparents, skills from their parents and other village adults, and played with children of all different ages. The apprenticeship system was another powerful intergenerational structure. A young boy of 12 or 13 would go to live with a master craftsman, a man in his 30s, 40s, or 50s. He would learn a trade not in a classroom full of his peers, but through a deep, one-on-one relationship with an experienced adult. In the church, the monastery, and the guild, people of all ages were mixed together, each with a different role to play. The idea of a social group made up exclusively of 19-year-olds would have seemed bizarre. We have systematically dismantled these intergenerational connections. We created schools that segregate children by age down to the year. We created workplaces where people often progress in age-based cohorts. We created a teenager culture that defines itself in opposition to adult culture. We have created a world where a 15-year-old and a 75-year-old might have almost no meaningful interaction. As the sociologist Robert Putnam documented in his book Bowling Alone, this decline in social capital has affected all areas of our lives. The consequences are damaging for everyone. Young people miss out on the wisdom and perspective of their elders. Older people suffer from loneliness and a sense of uselessness, their accumulated life experience going to waste. We lose the sense of continuity and shared history that comes from a society where generations are in constant conversation. Rebuilding these connections is a vital task. It means actively seeking out friends who are not your age. It could mean volunteering with an organization that serves the elderly or one that mentors young people. It could be as simple as getting to know your older and younger neighbors. In some places, innovative programs are co-locating daycare centers and nursing homes to the great benefit of both the children and the seniors. It's about rejecting the artificial segregation of our society and recreating the kind of mixed age community that was the norm for almost all of human history. Did we create age segregation in the pursuit of efficiency and in the process create an epidemic of loneliness at both ends of the lifespan? What unique forms of knowledge and wisdom are lost forever when the old no longer have a chance to teach the young? Could the biggest social problems we face, from a crisis in elder care to a lack of purpose among the young, be solved by simply reintroducing different generations to each other? Number 4, where does your poop go? This is not a pleasant question, but it's an important one. For most of us in the developed world, the answer is away. We flush it down a toilet, and it disappears into a complex, hidden system of sewers and treatment plants. We use vast quantities of clean, drinkable water to transport our waste to a place where we will never have to see or think about it again. This is a modern miracle of sanitation. It is also a profound ecological mistake. The medieval peasant had a very different relationship with their waste. There were no flush toilets or sewer systems. They used a chamber pot or a privy, and the contents known as night soil were not waste. They were a valuable resource. This human manure was carefully collected and used to fertilize the fields. It was a crucial part of a closed-loop agricultural system. The nutrients taken out of the soil in the form of food were returned to the soil in the form of manure. This cycle was essential. Without artificial fertilizers, maintaining soil fertility was one of the biggest challenges of medieval agriculture. They used animal manure, crop rotation, and fallow periods, but human manure was a key ingredient. In his book, Farmers of 40 Centuries, the agronomist F.H. King documented how, in the early 20th century, traditional Chinese agriculture was still using this principle to support a huge population on a limited amount of land, with incredible efficiency and sustainability. They had maintained their soil fertility for millennia by returning all organic waste, including night soil, to the fields. Our modern flush and forget system breaks this cycle. We take nutrients from the soil, eat them, and then flush them into the water system. This has two disastrous consequences. First, we deplete our agricultural soils, forcing us to rely on synthetic fertilizers made from fossil fuels. This process is energy intensive and unsustainable. Second, we pollute our rivers and oceans with an excess of nutrients, leading to algal blooms and dead zones where aquatic life cannot survive. We have turned a valuable resource into a dangerous pollutant. Reclaiming the wisdom of this medieval habit is one of the great challenges of modern engineering. We cannot go back to using chamber pots in our cities, but we can design better systems. There is a growing movement for ecological sanitation that focuses on composting toilets and other technologies that treat human waste as a resource. These systems separate liquid and solid waste and process them into safe, effective fertilizer. In places like rural Haiti and parts of Europe, these ideas are being put into practice, creating sanitation systems that also build soil fertility. On a personal level, we can start by composting our food scraps. This is a small but powerful way to participate in the nutrient cycle, turning waste into valuable soil for a garden. It's a first step in unlearning the modern idea that our waste should just disappear and relearning the ancient ecological truth that in nature there is no such thing as waste. In our desire for cleanliness and convenience, have we created a sanitation system that is fundamentally at odds with the laws of ecology? What would our cities look like if our sewage treatment plants were redesigned to be fertilizer factories? Is the long-term health of our civilization dependent on us relearning the simple ancient lesson of putting our poop back on the land? Number 3, what does your handwriting look like? When was the last time you wrote a letter by hand? Not a quick note, but a full letter. For most of us, the keyboard has replaced the pen. We type our emails, our reports, our social media posts. Our handwriting, once a fundamental skill, has become a relic. In the Middle Ages, the act of writing was a slow, deliberate, physical art form. Before the printing press, every book was a manuscript, written by hand. This work was often done by monks in a part of the monastery called the scriptorium. Being a scribe was a demanding, highly skilled profession. They used a quill pen, made from a bird's feather, and ink that they often mixed themselves. They wrote on parchment or vellum, made from processed animal skin. The process was slow and laborious. A single book could take a year or more to copy. Because of this effort, writing was an act of profound concentration. The scribes developed beautiful, intricate scripts like Carolingian minuscule or Gothic script. Their work was not just about transmitting information, it was about creating an object of beauty. The physical act of forming each letter was a kind of meditation. It engaged the hand, the eye, and the mind in a unified process. As described in Mark Drugan's Medieval Calligraphy, Its History and Technique, the scribe's entire body was involved in the work. We have traded this slow, embodied practice for the breathtaking speed and efficiency of the keyboard. We can now write and communicate faster than any scribe could have dreamed. But we have lost the unique connection between the hand and the brain that handwriting fosters. The scientific studies have shown that the physical act of writing by hand activates parts of the brain that typing does not. Students who take notes by hand have been shown to have a better conceptual understanding of the material than those who type their notes. The process of forming the letters seems to help cement the ideas in the mind. Writing by hand is also a more personal and intimate form of communication. A typed letter feels anonymous and impersonal. A handwritten letter carries the mark of the sender. Their personality is in the slant of their letters, the pressure of the pen. It is a physical artifact of their presence. Receiving a handwritten letter in an age of email feels like a special gift. Reviving this habit doesn't mean giving up your computer. It means finding small ways to bring the pen back into your life. Keep a journal and write in it by hand. Write thank you notes instead of sending thank you emails. When you are brainstorming ideas, try doing it on paper instead of on a screen. The slowness of the process can lead to different kinds of thoughts. It forces you to be more deliberate. It is an act of resistance against the relentless speed and ephemerality of the digital world. By choosing the efficiency of the keyboard, have we lost a powerful tool for thinking and learning? What is the cognitive cost of a world where children are learning to type before they can master cursive? Is the personal physical act of handwriting a form of communication so intimate and human that no digital technology can ever truly replace it? Number 2, do you know how to be a good guest? We think of medieval society as being violent and chaotic, but it was also governed by a complex and powerful set of social codes. One of the most important was the law of hospitality. In a world with few inns and dangerous roads, the willingness to take a stranger into your home was a vital social function. And the rules for how a host and a guest should behave were taken very seriously. Hospitality was a sacred duty. The Bible and classical traditions both emphasize the importance of welcoming the stranger. In a monastery, the guest master was one of the most important officials. The rule of St. Benedict commands that all guests be received as Christ himself. For a layperson, offering hospitality was a way to display social status and build alliances. But it was also a moral obligation. In return, the guest had a set of responsibilities. You did not arrive unannounced if you could help it. You brought a gift for your host if you were able. You did not overstay your welcome. 3 days was a common limit. You were expected to be a pleasant and entertaining companion. You praised your host's generosity, and most importantly, you did not harm your host or their family. The bond between host and guest was considered sacred. To violate it, as happens in Shakespeare's Macbeth when Macbeth murders his guest King Duncan, was seen as a particularly heinous crime. We have largely lost this formal code of hospitality. We have hotels and Airbnb which turn the relationship into a commercial transaction. When we stay with friends, the rules are often unstated and ambiguous. We don't know how much to help out, or when we might be overstaying our welcome. The art of being a good guest and a good host has atrophied. We see the echoes of this lost art in our social anxiety. People worry about hosting a dinner party. Will the food be good enough? Will people have a good time? We worry about being a house guest. Are we being a burden? The lack of a clear shared social script makes these interactions more stressful than they need to be. Reclaiming this habit means being more intentional about our roles as hosts and guests. When you are a host, focus on making your guest feel genuinely welcome and cared for. It's not about impressing them, it's about providing for them. When you are a guest, focus on being a contribution, not a burden. Be on time, bring a small gift, offer to help, express your gratitude sincerely. Turn off your phone and be present with your host. It's about understanding that hospitality is a reciprocal relationship, a dance of giving and receiving that strengthens social bonds. As our society becomes more individualistic and transient, have we forgotten the basic human skills required to welcome and be welcomed? What would happen to our communities if we all made a commitment to invite someone new into our homes for a meal once a month? Is the decline of private hospitality and the rise of commercial lodging a symptom of a deeper decay in our social trust? Number 1, what do you do in the middle of the night? If you wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep, you probably think there's something wrong with you. You might have maintenance insomnia, you might reach for a sleeping pill or worry about how tired you'll be tomorrow. But what if this pattern of, waking up in the middle of the night is not a disorder? What if it's the natural way humans are supposed to sleep? In 1992, the historian Roger Ekirch published a groundbreaking paper, which he later expanded into the book At Day's Close Night and Times Past. After studying hundreds of historical documents, diaries, court records, medical texts, and literature, he discovered something astonishing. For most of human history, people did not sleep in a single, consolidated 8-hour block. They slept in two phases. This was called segmented sleep. People would go to bed a couple of hours after dusk and sleep for about 4 hours. They would then wake up for an hour or two around midnight. This period was not seen as an annoying interruption. It was a normal and valued part of the night. It was known as the watch. People used this quiet, peaceful time for all sorts of activities. They would pray, meditate, or reflect on their dreams. They would have sex. They would have quiet conversations with their spouse. They might get up and do small chores like tending the fire. Then they would go back to sleep for a second 4-hour block, the second sleep, waking up around dawn. This pattern of sleeping only began to disappear in the late 17th century and was gone by the 19th century. The change was driven by the rise of industrial capitalism and the spread of artificial lighting. Streetlights and brighter home lighting pushed bedtimes later, and the new emphasis on industrial efficiency demanded a single consolidated workday. We began to think of the night as a waste of time. The idea of a productive, wakeful period in the middle of it became strange and then was forgotten completely. We forced ourselves into the 8-hour block that we now consider normal. The science backs up Eckertch's historical findings. In the 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted a famous experiment where he deprived a group of people of artificial light for 14 hours a day. At first, they slept for long periods, but after a few weeks, they settled into a distinct, segmented sleep pattern, exactly like the one Ekirch found in the historical record. They would sleep for about 4 hours, wake for 1 to 3 hours, and then sleep for another 4. This suggests that our modern insomnia might not be a disease, but a remnant of our natural, biphasic sleep pattern crying out against the artificial constraints of modern life. Reclaiming this habit could revolutionize our relationship with sleep and night. If you wake up in the middle of the night, don't panic. Don't see it as a failure. See it as an opportunity. Get out of bed, read a book in dim light, meditate. Write in a journal. Resist the urge to look at your phone. When you feel sleepy again, go back to bed. By reframing this experience, we can transform a source of anxiety into a peaceful, productive, and deeply human part of our day. Did our brains evolve for a single, consolidated sleep, or did we brutally force them into this pattern to serve the needs of the factory? What unique cognitive or creative abilities have we lost by eliminating that quiet, wakeful hour in the dead of night? Is the global epidemic of insomnia simply a mass cultural forgetting of how we are supposed to rest?